Hey Solos, I have another bonus episode for you. Hey everyone, it's Samantha and welcome to the Solo Magic Podcast, the podcast about the magic of going to Disney World solo. This is another solo story. This time, this solo story takes place in Disneyland, which is pretty awesome. This podcast is really focused on Disney World, and like Disney World is like its own thing, right? It's like a whole world. But I think there's something special about Disneyland, and I was really, really excited to connect with this person to be able to talk about her experiences going to Disneyland solo and what that means for her larger life outside of going to the parks. Anyway, this is Solo Magic Podcast. Like I said, the podcast with the magic of going to Disney World solo. Please make sure that no matter if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or on YouTube, you like, you subscribe, you rate, you review, you share with your friends, and so that we can continue to kind of build this big community. You can also get in touch with me on Instagram, Disney_solo_magic, as well as Facebook, Disney Solo Magic. And we now have a blog, DisneySoloMagic.blogspot.com. Now, I talked today to Cristi, and the reason why we connected initially was because her Instagram handle is Cristi.PhDizney, PhD Disney, right? And I have a PhD and she's working on her PhD. So I was so interested to be like, oh, do you, is your PhD in Disney studies? It's not. But it was really, really cool to be able to connect with that. And that's what was really awesome about this particular conversation, because we were able to talk about like the world of academia and things like research and reading and grading and all of that, and the heaviness of academia sometimes, and working on your PhD, and the way that Disney is able to provide kind of a counterbalance to that, and also really highlight some other creative ways to share stories and to tell stories and to kind of explore the world. And it was just such an awesome, awesome conversation for those reasons. Now, all of those social media things that I said are in the link below, but so is Cristi's PH Disney Instagram account, as well as her YouTube and all of her socials. So make sure that you follow her, because she has always some really great pictures about what they're doing at Disneyland. And yeah, it was just really, really wonderful to talk with her. So I think we should just get right on into it. Let's do it. Cristi, all the way from California, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You're the first person that I have asked to talk about Disneyland, and I am so excited for you to come on and talk about your perspective. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me onto the pod. I'm super excited and looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Me too. I think it's easier to go to Disneyland solo. Like, I think there's a lot of locals that go, but hearing what that's like, I think is going to be just so valuable for the podcast. Could you introduce yourself to everybody?
So my name is Cristi, as Samantha said, and I am a local SoCal resident that goes to the Disney parks quite often.
So are you originally from California? Like, was going to Disneyland like part of your childhood?
I am originally from California, have lived in SoCal pretty much my entire life. And no, Disneyland was not, I think when I was a child, I may have went once with my mom and dad, plus other family members. And then I do remember that I went to Disneyland when I was in middle school on a school field trip. But other than that, Disney or going to Disneyland was not something that I necessarily did when I was growing up. But now, in the last 3 years, it's definitely become like a fixture in my life.
It's been really interesting in talking to all these people for the solo stories about like how much it wasn't a huge part of people's childhood. Like, it was on the periphery, but it's not like they're like, oh yeah, I've been going every year for the past 35 years.
Yeah, no, definitely have not. And I can't even remember. Yeah, I think we only went once. Maybe just one time. Like we went the one time and they got the pictures and we're like, okay, that's our Disney experience.
Yeah.
And then I didn't start to go more until I was in my 20s. And then I would buy like the single day tickets and go for that day, maybe like once or twice a year, depending. And so during the pandemic, no one could go to the park. And so didn't go in 2020, I think that was. And then when the park reopened in 2021, that's when I went with a friend, and she suggested that I should become a magic key holder as like a means to have like an outlet from like my other world, which is like studying and being like a grad student. And I was like, oh, that might be a good idea. And so that night I went and I bought the enchant key. Like I think it was right before they stopped sales for a long time too. So I was really lucky. And I got what do they call, like a discount, because if you upgrade your ticket, you get a little
Right. Yeah.
magic key.
That's not a discount. That's just using the cost of the ticket for the pass.
You get the cost for the ticket toward the pass. So I got a little discount that day. The only discount I've got on the magic key since that point. And so I got the magic key, and it really did offer a different sort of outlet from my PhD work that was actually really needed.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people that I've talked to have kind of their adult solo Disney stories kind of wrapped around COVID as well. But I think that you're the first person who has articulated that it's like a particular explicit like departure from your normal 9 to 5 work. And we've talked offline, or well, no, I guess it's online, but not on the podcast, about our shared kind of academic background, and the kind of lightness but thoughtfulness of Disney is such a contrast to the all thoughts and quite heaviness of academia, that it's great that we're so close that it's like an easy thing for you to be able to do as a nice compliment with an E, not an I.
Yeah, it's been like a really and it's also been very helpful in terms of my academic work too, because it allows me to take a break,
Yeah.
and my brain completely switches between the two, which is really, really nice. So I'm not always thinking about my dissertation project every single minute of the day, which is nice. And so when I get back to that, I feel re-energized. And it's just nice to have a break from that. And then it's also good to have fun too in a PhD.
Yeah.
And that I can't, and to get your 10,000 steps in. Those two things are transformative. Instead of
See,
sitting
you need to come to Disney World because it's 20,000 steps.
Oh man, I think I've only hit 20,000 steps at Disneyland maybe once or twice.
Yeah, no, that's the norm. My step count is like like you can tell when I've gone to Disney which months my pedometer, or like my Apple, health thing for the year, has these giant spikes, and the rest of it is like quite low. I think the other nice thing about Disney, especially when you're doing like heavy academic work like you and I do, is that it also like demonstrates, well, at least for me, that there are other creative ways to problem solve and to engage in the world. And I know that that has been really helpful, even if I'm not talking about it explicitly, when I go back and do some academic work, to be like, oh, that's right, we can use different methods and different ways to tell stories. And that has been kind of freeing, because like certain professions like academia, certain disciplines can be very rigid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very, very, very rigid. Yeah, and it's definitely taught me how to be more open to different ways to storytell, even within my own work, and to be more receptive to ideas. Which
Mm,
Disneyland, like ideas everywhere, really,
yes.
from marketing to merch to just the rides and the stories that they tell. And even with like Tiana's Bayou Adventure, you know,
So exciting.
at Walt Disney World, I think they made the announcement that's going to release or be open to the public June 26th, was it?
28. Yeah.
June
Yeah.
28th.
Yeah. And
That's
then there's like
good.
pass holder previews like coming up. Like by the time that this is aired, I think they'll already be in like pass holder and DVC previews, which is pretty exciting.
That's exciting. I can't wait for it to open over in Disneyland. I walk past it every time I go to the park and I'm like, we're almost there.
Are you gonna sing?
Almost there.
Are you gonna sing?
No, but I think I might sing on opening day. I'm definitely gonna go. And you want to know, like Splash Mountain wasn't even an attraction that I went on when it was open, when it was Splash Mountain because of the drop.
Yeah.
Terrified of that drop. I was like, oh, but for Tiana's Bayou Adventure, I think I'm gonna brave it at least once.
I never went on Splash Mountain either because like the story, I was like, I'm not really into this. And then one time I was there with my mother and she's like, it's very hot. There's no line. Like, let's just do Splash Mountain. And I was like, all right, but I'm telling you, it can be a little uncomfortable. And so we're doing the ride and she's like, how is this still open? And yeah, so I'm very excited to have a water ride there. I'm very committed. But I think with the Tiana Bayou Adventure, I think what that also has really shown is that all of these decisions have been so thoughtful and so well researched,
Mhm.
right? So like to go back to academia, like they worked with all these different experts in the field to not only have a cool ride, but to have something that is meaningful and cultural and that is based in different stories and based in different histories, especially different histories than Splash Mountain. And like that kind of thoughtfulness is always, especially as an academic, is always just really cool for me to see and to appreciate how history and culture can be honored and not just displayed in a publication.
Yeah, no, and it really reflects well at the park, especially now with the renovations that they're doing with Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
So that whole area from Tiana's Palace all the way to Tiana's Bayou Adventure is kind of, it just sinks really well now, and it gives a different perspective on American history, especially American history of the South, that I don't think many where it wasn't visible before. Well, in a
Yeah.
different way, but now
Yeah.
at least the park has
Yeah.
gotten it.
Different histories were visible. Yeah, I haven't been to Disneyland in quite a while, and I'm really excited to see the new Haunted Mansion, to eat in Tiana's new restaurant. Like I'm really interested to see how that type of storytelling is happening there. So, can you tell me about going to Disneyland solo? Like for people who are listening, can you talk a little bit about the experience of Disneyland too? Because it's similar but so different than the world, Disney World.
Yeah, so I guess when I first began going to Disneyland, well, there's many layers. So when I first got the Magic Key Pass, I was super excited. So I may have went all of the time, and then I tried to do everything like the rides, the merch, the food, everything that you can experience in one day. I think even at one point I was like buying the Genie Pass. I was like, why am I buying the Genie Pass? And I have the Magic Key? But that's that was a realization that I had a few months afterwards. So I was super excited. So for me, when I first started going to the park solo, it was about getting everything done. Like at least going on 3 rides, at least trying one new food item, going to both parks, like having like a real, I guess, like full Disney day, for lack of a better term that we might call like a tourist day at Disneyland. There wasn't too much downtime in my Disney schedule when I first started to go. I wanted to see the parade because I think when I got my pass, it was during Christmas season. So I was like, okay, I gotta see the parade, I gotta go on the rides, I gotta go on Haunted Mansion, I gotta go on Pirates, I gotta go on Big Thunder. And as I started to go to the park more and more, I started to be like, wait, I don't have to see everything in one day
I
or
can come back
every
tomorrow.
week. I'm coming back tomorrow. Things really started to slow down for me in that sense. So then, just I guess within the last year or so, when I go to Disneyland now, I'm like, okay, let me just like take my time and enjoy my day and like pace throughout the park or walk throughout the park. So now if I go to Disneyland, like I could go to Disneyland, spend a whole day there and not get on one single attraction and still have like
Mhm.
a very good time. Or like this last time that I went to Disneyland by myself, I was like, okay, I want to go see the Better Together parade. So I just sat in one spot for like an hour, maybe 2 hours, just waiting for the parade and like watching people walk by and stuff like that. So it's really started to slow. Um, but one thing I will say that I have found tricky ever since I started going to Disneyland as a solo, like, okay, you know how you camp out for parades and you're like waiting hours and hours, but then you have to like use the restroom or to go get a snack.
Right.
So it's also forced me to like talk to people, like my neighbors that are also waiting for the parade and be like, hey, I have to like run off to the restroom real quick. Or I want to run off and get a popcorn. Do you mind watching my stuff? In which I'm naturally like a shy person. So for me to like, say hello to the people next to me has actually forced me to be a little bit more um I guess outgoing, if that maybe that's not quite the right word for that. But yeah, it's forced me to come out of my shell a little bit more because I have to talk to people. So yeah, that's what I would say like my experience at Disneyland is now. Me just taking in all of the sights and the sounds of the park and not necessarily going there to try to experience everything in one day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Is there a particular time of year that you or thing like a special thing that you like to see at Disneyland or DCA going as a solo?
Uh, yes. Christmas time is probably my favorite. Christmas season at Disneyland and DCA is probably my favorite time of the year. The Christmas parade, I love the Christmas parade. I'll watch both show times of the Christmas parade. I think it's like one of the cutest parades out there. They've added Tiana, I think, like recently. I love her. I love the princess section of the parade. And then I also love the Santa meet and greet. I've done that twice annually now. So now I just have to go visit Santa Claus. And like I think last year I visited the Santa in Disneyland and Critter Country. And then they also have a Santa meet and greet in I think it's Red the Redwood Creek Forest.
See, at Disney World, there you can't meet Santa at Magic Kingdom unless it is the after hours Christmas party. It's such a different way of organizing those types of experiences at Disneyland because so many more locals go. It's a really interesting it's a really interesting approach. Yeah, it's so interesting those different approaches. Just like the overlay, the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay on Haunted Mansion. Like the Haunted Mansion in Orlando, they don't do that at all, right? Like there aren't any of those differences. So yeah, it's a cool kind of again thoughtful choice about the two different places.
Disneyland, they do well because, like you mentioned, a lot of local SoCal people go to Disneyland. So I guess to switch it up for residents, you go to the park. You have like three phases of the park during the beginning of the year, then Halloween, and then Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, but you also get those like extra evening events. Like the Pride event last year looked so fun. And and like this year they're going to do it again. I think it's going to be even busier this year. And yeah, that just looked so fun. It was fun because the characters were just doing some different things, right? And it was kind of nice to see that part of the world.
yeah, last year's Pride Night looked like a lot of fun. I did not get a chance to go to the event last year. I kind of free 99 to the fireworks by booking a reservation on that day. And going to the center of the park just to, what do they call it? The Espionade, I think,
Yeah.
just to see the fireworks. So I was on the outside looking in and I was like, oh, this looks like a really cool event that I probably should have secured tickets to. And then I saw everything online. And then I think I even remember reading that the governor went that first night. I was like, oh, everybody went to Pride Night. I
Everybody
never did. I missed the party. So yeah, it looked like a great event.
Yeah, it looked really fun. So to go back to just general solo travel, what is something that you do solo at Disneyland or DCA that you wouldn't do with others?
Probably walking around and taking in the decor.
Mm,
So when I go with my brother, he's more let's walk around, get on rides and look at merch kind of person, like kind of Disney person, or I'm like a more mellow, let's walk around the park and look at the flowers.
right. Yeah.
Flower changed. When we walk around the park, oh, let's go check out Haunted Mansion. Did anything about Haunted Mansion change in like the time since last we've been here? Something else I do, I study at the park.
Ooh, love it.
Yeah, I'll bring my books with me that I have to read, and I'll read or I will write at the park. And sometimes I've even graded. I shouldn't say sometimes. A lot of the times I was a TA. I would take my grading to the park.
I said to you before that I had a video series related to education and not Disney stuff, and we would take a quote from every conversation and we would put it on like a little Instagram thing and put up the quote and then share it around. And I don't do that with these solo stories, but if I did, that would be my quote. No, most of the times I'm grading there.
Yeah, most of the times, especially when I was a teacher's assistant, I would be grading because it was just the only Disneyland. For everything else is also you go there. One, the coffee shop at DCA stays open till 10, so perfect timing. It
Hmm.
will take me from like 2 to 10 to grade all of those papers. And then there's coffee, there's food. And then if I get tired, I can walk around, recharge, go sit back down, order another coffee, probably get some more food, and continue to grade. And that's how you get through grading sometimes. Like one place with food, with coffee, check, check, check. Made my way through a lot of papers.
Yeah, and also that you aren't sitting in the abyss of bad writing. With all due respect to your students.
That's you get up and like take a breath and like, okay, no, there's positivity everywhere and go
Yeah.
back and take that positivity back to the papers. You're like, okay.
Every time I've gone to Disney World, no, I shouldn't say every time, but there was a whole handful of times where I would bring something, like I'd bring some work, not my 9 to 5 work, but the things that I do on the side related to reading and writing. And every time I get there, I was like, yeah, you know what's better? Not doing this. Just like swimming or like not schlepping this bag of whatever things around. But, like you said at the beginning, it also, I found, helped productivity, even though we don't always have to be productive, because it gave my brain a rest. And there was an article that came out about remote workers like working from Disney World, and I know a lot of people do that. And I think I would do that more. I think I would do that more, but I don't want to leave my cats at home. And like with a pet sitter because it's a 3-hour flight for me. Um, but there is something really kind of seductive about being able to work and play on the same day.
Yeah, and those days where I was grading, I never had to question whether or not I make it to the nighttime spectaculars because I would always be there. I'm like, well, we're at 9 o'clock. I might as well like throw the fireworks. Or back then, Fantasmic was still before Murphy retired. Fantasmic was still happening. So I was like, oh, I'm already here. I might as well wait. And it was kind of like a reward. Okay, I got through all of that reading or I got through all of that reading or writing that I needed to do, and like I could give myself a little reward and see Fantasmic or the fireworks, or sometimes all three, depending on how timing would work out, and then go.
Or how bad grading was. Or
Yeah, or how bad.
so what is a tip that you would give to another solo traveler going to Disneyland?
So one tip that I would give a solo traveler is to feel comfortable at the parks. One, because I
That's
know when
great.
you go to the parks and you see like a lot of families and our, I guess, group dynamics that happen. And sometimes it can feel a bit alien, like a little alienating when you're at the park if you're by yourself and you don't have anyone with you. That could be like its own thing. So my best advice is that if you're going to the park solo, is that you're comfortable at the park and that you feel like you can participate in all things that are happening at the park, whether that be you want to go on a ride, if you want to get a photo experience with Mickey, and everyone like you're probably the only solo person in line. And I'm like, oh, everyone is looking at me, but I want a picture with Mickey, take the picture with Mickey. Or if you want to take a picture with Goofy, or even if you want to go to the Magic Key Terrace or any sit down dining restaurant, that you do that and be comfortable with your experience as a solo traveler at that time and in that moment. Because I think when I first started, I had to learn that
Mm.
to be comfortable with, because I didn't used to do character meets. I was like, oh, that's not the place for me, quote
Right.
unquote,
Yeah.
to be in line to meet Mickey. Like, why would I do that? But as I continue, or even going to like Carnation Cafe, which is a sit down restaurant at Disneyland, or like I just said, Magic Key Terrace, which is another sit down restaurant in DCA. I wasn't comfortable doing those sorts of things because, usually you're going to be in that space alone, you're at the table by yourself. And it seems like everyone around you is with someone else. You're like, oh, you kind of just want to like do quick service, get your food and go kind of thing. So that I really had to grow into feeling comfortable being at certain places or certain locations on my own. And even asking like a cast member, even if it is a photo pass opportunity to like take a picture on my
Hmm.
phone, like even if there is a cast member that's taking a picture. And I think that took me the longest because I would really struggle with that sometimes, not feeling comfortable, especially at a sit down restaurant. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm at a sit down restaurant. Everyone else in here is a family or a duo or a pair. I'm just sitting here a little awkward, like eating my waffle. So that I really had to grow into. That took a lot of time. And that also kind of goes into why I felt like I had to do everything in one day, like the rides and stuff. Because I was like, okay, the rides is more available to me than the sit down or like a character meet. So I was like, oh, let's go on every ride that we can go on. And I was like, no, slow down. You can go in other places and other spaces too and feel comfortable in that space.
That is really great and thoughtful advice. And I also, it's funny because when you had said earlier, like, uh, my initial solo trips were so like pressed on getting everything done. I was going to ask you, like, what do you think drove that? But then it sounded like a therapy question, and I didn't want to make this therapy without your consent. So it's interesting that you have consented now to therapy.
Yeah, I know that was a big part. Like, I was like, okay, because it is tough to, well, at least from my experience, it can be tough to be in those more, I guess, I'm gonna say like insulated spaces, but character meets, especially with like Disney princesses and all of that, can feel a little, I shouldn't be in line for this thing.
Yeah.
Like I shouldn't be in line to meet Tiana right now or Belle, I shouldn't like move on to the next thing. And that was, I had to work through that. I was like, no, you want a picture with Tiana, just take the picture with Tiana. Now you want a picture with Pocahontas, just take the picture with Pocahontas, or I would just like walk away. So like the first year of my Magic Key, I don't have any like character photos.
Oh,
So I didn't take
interesting.
a picture with anyone.
I think, if I may, another way to kind of think about that as a tip is like for people to think, it's not the thing that is, it's not the thing that needs to be changed or that is inherently awkward. It's my feelings towards it. And if my
Yeah.
feelings have already brought me here, then like lean further into those feelings to do all of this stuff. Like it's not inherently awkward. It's something that can be practiced. And I really love that as a piece of advice.
Yeah. Like I really had to um practice makes perfect. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stand in the line, I'm gonna wait. Or even with like I mentioned parades earlier, like feeling comfortable enough to like tap the people next to me and be like, okay, like I have to, go to the restroom or get popcorn real quick. Can you watch my stuff? Like all those things you have to feel comfortable with doing as a solo traveler. Or else, I mean, you go and you can have a very, very interesting time. That might not be the best time. At least you went to the park that day, so you can't call it a bad time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. A day in the parks is a bad day in the parks is still a day in the parks.
It's still a day at the park, so, it's like, okay, it's just like an interesting between, oh, I didn't have the best time I could have had, but I can't say it was a bad time because I am at Disneyland.
Right, right. Yes,
Disneyland, it's a
100%.
good day.
I was at Disney World for a hurricane and people were like, "Oh, that must have sucked." And I was like, "Yeah, but it was still at Disney World."
Yeah, exactly.
So,
It's
yeah.
like that.
Yeah. One of the things that helped me not feel maybe like shame or embarrassment about going so much by myself is seeing other people go so much by themselves. And when I joined a Facebook group of solo travelers to Disney, to see the joy that people had in doing these solo trips was so heartening to me. And that's one of the things that I wanted to really get from this podcast and the different social media things that I'm doing, that I want people to be able to think about how magical this can be for you and to lean into that and to embrace it and to think about like, oh, what might hold you back and what could invite you to have an even bigger experience. Like one of the women that I spoke to for a solo story, her name is Claire Freedom Stein. And there's it's very easy to find her episode. And she's like, just be your biggest self when you're there. And I think that's just so wonderful to like have all these stories, that collecting all these stories to be able to really like, again, lean into the fact that these can be really magical. And yeah, you can become like less introverted or braver or just more photogenic about
Yeah.
wanting to get other pictures. Like so many people ask, like, is getting the photo pass worth it? And it's like, well, it's worth it if you make it worth it, right? Just go and
Yeah.
be like, yeah, we're going to just do a whole photo shoot every time I see a cast member. So I love that tip. Thank you so much for sharing it. One final question before we say goodbye. What is something, if someone was coming to Disneyland by themselves, what is something that you want them to like see or do or eat while they're there?
If you're able like to schedule a trip during the holiday season, Christmas time, seeing Cars Land, I think is really yeah, Cars Land in the Christmas season and even Halloween season, it really is really pretty, especially at night when you go on Radiator Springs and they have like the color coordinated of like the for in Halloween for like Oogie Boogie Bash. I think like the color scheme is like green and purple. And to see that lit up in like the waterfall, very pretty at night.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This has been so, so wonderful. Thank you for coming on the podcast. How can people find you? We connect on Instagram, but I know you don't just have Instagram now.
Yes, so I am on Instagram and then I am also on YouTube. And then my channel name for both is Cristi.PhDizney with a Z and not an S. And that is how people can find me.
And you can find the links to Christie's YouTube and Instagram in the description of this podcast episode. So it's very, very easy to link. Thank you so much. This was really, really wonderful. I hope we get a chance to meet in person one day at
Yes,
either Disneyland or Disney World. I am definitely not particular about that choice.
it was great speaking with you today, Samantha.
All right. Well, until we get a chance to see each other in the parks, it was great talking with you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Solos. It's Samantha. I hope you like this episode and all the episodes of Solo Magic, the podcast about the magic of going to Disney World solo. Just a reminder that you can listen on Apple, Spotify, and on YouTube. No matter where you're listening, please make sure you subscribe and rate and share with others. You can also connect with me on Instagram, Disney_solo_magic, as well as Facebook, Disney Solo Magic. And we have a new blog, DisneySoloMagic.blogspot.com, that will complement the information that we talk about on the podcast, as well as be able to highlight some different tips and tricks and information that will make your solo trip the most magical ever. Until next week, bye!